She told her friends she was finally leaving, that she was done being afraid. 2 days later, police forced open the door to her apartment in Uppsala, Sweden. Nothing looked disturbed. No broken windows, no signs of a struggle, except for the silence. This is the story of how a relationship that looked ordinary from the outside slowly became something deadly, and how the warning signs were there long before anyone stepped in. Uppsala, Sweden, a city known for students, safety, and routine. In 2018, 31-year-old Ellen Anderson lived in a small two-room apartment near a street called Svartskaten. She worked as an assistant preschool teacher. Early mornings, long days, a steady life. Ellen was quiet, dependable, the kind of person people described as easy to get along with. She had been in a relationship for nearly 4 years with Johan Lind, who was 34. 2 friends, they seemed normal, stable, calm. No one called it dangerous. From the outside, their life looked like any other. A shared routine, quiet nights, the comfortable rhythm of a long-term couple. That was the picture everyone saw. But behind closed doors, a different story was unfolding, one that no one would understand until it was far too late. They met through mutual friends at a summer gathering outside the town of Inking. At first, Johan was charming. He was attentive and protective. He remembered small details from their conversations, things Ellen herself might have forgotten. He sent messages every morning, without fail. He always wanted to know where she was, what she was doing. In the beginning, it felt like care. It felt like he was genuinely interested in her life, that he was simply being a supportive partner. That's how it often starts. The attention feels flattering. The constant contact feels like connection. For Ellen, it likely felt like she had found someone who truly saw her. But that intense focus, that need to know her every move, was the first seed of something else entirely. It was a pattern of behavior that would eventually tighten its grip, transforming from affection into something far more sinister. The changes were subtle at first, almost unnoticeable. Johan started to express dislike for certain friends of Ellen's. He'd say they were a bad influence, planting seeds of doubt about the people she had known for years. Then, he began to question her clothes. Was that skirt too short? Was that top too revealing? Her schedule became another point of contention. Why was she working late? Who was she meeting for lunch? Her very tone of voice was scrutinized. If she didn't answer her phone right away, he would grow cold and distant. That coldness would then curdle into anger. The arguments were never about one big thing. They were about 1,000 tiny things. Ellen once told a coworker, "It's just easier not to argue." That single sentence, spoken in passing, would later echo with a chilling significance. It was a quiet admission of defeat, the sound of someone slowly giving up pieces of themselves just to keep the peace. By 2017, the world around Ellen had started to shrink. She had stopped seeing her friends regularly. Johan preferred that they stayed home together. He would say the world was unsafe, that people couldn't be trusted. He insisted that he was the only one she needed, the only one who truly cared for her. Their arguments became more frequent, but they weren't the loud shouting matches you might imagine. They were controlled. There was a quiet intensity to them, a tension that filled their small apartment. Johan never hit her. He never left a bruise, and that made it so much harder to explain to anyone, maybe even to herself. How do you describe a fear that has no physical evidence? How do you explain that the worst wounds are the ones no one can see? The absence of physical violence created a confusing, isolating trap. It was abuse disguised as concern, control disguised as love. In the early months of 2018, the quiet fear that had been building inside Ellen finally became real enough for her to act. She contacted a local support line for victims of domestic abuse. She didn't file a police report or give her full name. She just asked questions. Questions that revealed the depth of her confusion and fear. "What counts as abuse?" she asked. "What if he doesn't let me leave?" She was trying to make sense of her reality, to put a name to the invisible cage that had been built around her. Around this time, she started quietly saving money, creating a small, secret fund for her escape. In April, she sent a message to her sister that now reads like a premonition. She wrote, "If I don't answer, something is wrong." She knew, on some level, that the situation was escalating, that the silent threats were becoming more and more concrete. She was laying the groundwork to leave, piece by painful piece. On May 14th, Ellen did what she had been planning for months. She told Johan she wanted to end the relationship. Witnesses who saw him later that day said he appeared calm, too calm. His lack of an outward emotional reaction was unsettling. That night, Ellen didn't go home. She stayed at a friend's place, putting a physical distance between them for the first time. The next afternoon, she told her friend she needed to go back to the apartment, just to collect some clothes and personal items. She thought she would be in and out quickly. She walked back into that apartment. She never left again. That brief return, that final trip to gather the remnants of her life, was the moment the door closed behind her for the last time. Her plan for freedom ended right where her life with him began. The next morning, Ellen didn't show up for work at the preschool. This was completely out of character for her. She was always punctual, always dependable. Her colleagues grew concerned as the hours passed with no word. They called her phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Finally, they called the police and requested a welfare check. When officers arrived at her apartment, the door was locked from the inside. They had to force it open. Inside, everything appeared normal at first glance. Nothing was out of place. No robbery, no mess. But in the bedroom, they found Ellen. The official cause of death was determined to be strangulation. The medical examiner estimated the time of death was within hours of her return to the apartment the previous afternoon. The silence in that room was the only evidence of the final, terrible struggle. There was no sign of a forced entry, and nothing had been stolen. The investigation immediately focused on Johan Lind. He became the primary suspect. When police recovered Ellen's phone, they found the digital breadcrumbs of her story. Messages to her friends and family showed her growing fear, her hesitation, and her carefully laid plans to leave. Friends testified about how she had become more and more isolated over the years. They described how Johan had slowly cut her off from her support system. The pattern became chillingly clear. This wasn't a random act of violence. This was the final, tragic conclusion to a long campaign of control and psychological abuse. The evidence painted a picture not of a sudden argument, but of a calculated response to losing control. In court, Johan denied everything. He claimed they had argued, yes, but that he loved her. His defense tried to paint the picture of a passionate, but ultimately normal, relationship. But the prosecutors argued for a different truth. They presented evidence of his controlling behavior, the isolation, Ellen's own words, expressing her fear. They argued that this was not a sudden act of rage committed in the heat of the moment. Instead, they framed it as the final, desperate act of a man who was about to lose his grip. It was the ultimate assertion of control. If he couldn't have her, no one could. The court agreed. Johan Lind was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to prison. The trial brought a legal conclusion, but it couldn't answer the question that haunted everyone. Why hadn't anyone seen it coming? After the trial, Ellen's family said something that gets to the heart of this tragedy. They said, "We thought she was just stressed." That's the most frightening part of this entire story. To the outside world, the warning signs didn't look like flashing red lights. They looked like stress. They looked like a rough patch in a relationship. Nothing looked extreme until it was too late. Ellen's story is a devastating reminder that the most dangerous situations are often the quietest. They don't announce themselves with shouting and broken glass. They creep in slowly, disguised as something else, until there's no escape. Violence in relationships rarely begins with violence. It begins with silence, with control, with fear disguised as love. It starts with small demands and quiet threats, chipping away at a person's confidence and independence until they feel completely alone. If you or someone you know is in a situation that feels controlling or unsafe, please know there is help available. You can reach out to your local domestic violence support service. Their resources are confidential and can provide guidance and a path to safety. If this story stayed with you, please share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories that explore what happens when ordinary lives collide with extraordinary horror. Thanks for watching.